Well, I think we're going to get rolling. So welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to have such a wonderful crowd. Jason, you are such a draw. This is fantastic.
You have no idea what I promised these people.
So my name is David Weil, and I welcome everybody to the Center for Bioethics and Humanities. My official title is Manager of Operations and Educational Technology, but basically, I've been doing a little bit of everything, and I helped Jason stage this exhibit. So we're really thrilled to be doing it. And, I had it was really interesting. Right before Christmas, I was looking at my phone and looking at CNN online because I always look at the news, and that's like a multi times a day I do that. And I saw this image that just caught my eye, and it was an image of a snowflake. And I said, oh, and I clicked on the story and I started reading it, and oh my gosh, he's from here, you know? And I said, this is amazing. These are fantastic pictures. So, of course, I emailed him, and within a few days, we were sitting in the lobby and talking about maybe doing a show. I had a few months of an open slot in the gallery before our next show. And, this was like kismet that this fell into our lap. And, at first I was thinking, snowflake, maybe a whole room full of snowflakes might be like visually fatiguing or something. It might not be, people might get tired of looking, even though they're unique. But Jason opened his laptop and started seeing these weather pictures and the storms. And I knew we had a show. Yeah. So thank you for jumping into this. Normally it takes us like 3 months, 6 months. Warren has a show coming up that we've been planning for a year. To think that we could do this in a few weeks, you're the fastest one we've ever done. So thank you for doing all the work.
Yeah. Well, oh, hardly.
Thank you.
Hardly.
So I'm really glad. But before we kind of get going with our discussion, there's people I need to thank, that made this possible. As gallery isn't a one-person operation. And one person I want to thank is Ron Landucci, who I don't think made it tonight, but maybe is online. Ron made all of the beautiful color oversized prints in the gallery. And he's a master. I've been involved in photography for 50 years. And I can tell you, this is a master printmaker. He is fantastic. And he went through some amazing heroic hoops to make the show happen. And I want to thank Ron for his work. And he also produced all the prints for the 1/1000 show that's around the lobby. So if you have a chance, go take a look at that as well, because those are all his work as well. And then Stephen Alsabrook, our chief installer. Stephen's amazing. I mean, he's installed not only the shows currently on display here at the Fulgenetti, but Steve and I have been working together for now on 11 years, and he and I have installed over 35 shows together. And the range is amazing. I mean, the show before this, we were hanging 10-foot tall ceramic fiberglass neurons from the ceiling. I mean, we've done Renoir, Monet, Cézanne, Matisse. We've done photographs of 12-foot tall photographs of tattooed Chicano gang members. I mean, the range is amazing. Stephen is a perfectionist. He knows his expertise, and he's a great guy to work with. So thank you again, Stephen, for everything that you do. And then there's Matt, my boss, Dr. Matt Winia, who runs the Center for Bioethics and Humanities. Matt, you
excellent user of the microphone.
Excellent user of the microphone.
Key skill.
Yeah, key skill, great leader. And thank you for just giving me the freedom to do everything that needs to get done. I really appreciate it. And my mentor, Tess Jones, isn't here because she retired about 6 months ago unofficially and recently officially. But she taught me a great deal about how to run an arts and humanities organization. So thank you, Tess. And our staff, we have great staff running the place. Lori Monroe, our education manager, Malia Himber, our outreach manager, and Danielle Chet, our program manager. They make everything happen. They're the engine behind the center. So thank you all. So without further ado, it's time to sit down and introduce Jason for those of you who don't know. And
There's
get the
not
show
a
on the
lot of
road.
those. Thank goodness I invited family and friends because you guys totally stocked this. This is great.
Well, let me give you a little bit of background about Jason for those of you who don't know much about him. Jason was born and raised in Denver and completed his MD at University of Colorado right here. And then went down to Mayo Clinic, Florida for 10 years. And he recently returned in 2011 back to Colorado and is working at University of Colorado as their Associate Director of Emergency Preparedness. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jason's married.
I
has
am.
3 children. Is everybody here tonight?
Yeah, well, 2 are over there and 1 is over there. So,
Great.
yeah, there you go.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So let's start at kind of the start is, where did this, besides being a amazing physician and, being so busy, where did your interest in photography and weather, did they come together simultaneously? Did they come separately? Tell us about kind of how this got started.
Yeah, so courtesy of global warming, we don't see this that often anymore, but there used to be a lot more tornadoes here in Southeast Aurora when I was growing up. I'm sure Jennifer can probably remember a few. We actually went to elementary school together, and Jennifer Dittman, and and she's still scarred. But they showed us in first grade. I'm sorry, the quality on this audio is a little off. I don't know. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
It's a little hot. Maybe turn it down a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hot and hot. But they showed us in first grade this movie called The Night of the Twisters, which they showed us again in second grade. And I remember I suddenly fell in love with tornadoes. I thought they were just amazing. But really, I owe my parents a great deal of gratitude for their supporting my photography bug. My dad had a camera that I longed over, a Pentax. Do you even know what model it was? Pentax, right. Good. So that was useful. They were very supportive of me and eventually got me in, when I turned to 8, my first camera, a Polaroid camera. And the Polaroids were super, super cool, but there was only 10 shots of them. And a roll of film could go anywhere as high as 24 or 36 shots for my kids who have no clue. But and I desperately wanted to start using a camera in a way that would allow me to capture sort of the breadth and scope of these of just vistas. I loved vistas, and I loved trying to frame the shot to capture the magnificence of the sky. And I was lucky enough that I begged them to go one step up in a camera. And about a year later, I got my own Olympus, this small little camera with 36 shots I could take per roll of film. And that was when I really started to commit to sort of how do you frame the sky, which is rather large if you're just trying to capture the sky. And that began my lifelong passion for that. And photography has been a part of my life ever since.
Great. That's great. That was kind of the start of weather, but the snowflakes came later down the road.
Much
right?
Yeah, in Florida, they don't have a lot of snowflakes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Now-
a little warm.
Now, I kind of stumbled upon your photography, just happenstance. Did you kind of stumble upon snowflake photography?
I did indeed. Actually, I thought it was, I came across a photographer, Don Komarechka, who's a Canadian. Yes, he's a rock star. These wonderful photographers here who I met via Twitter also know him, but know him in person. And he was being interviewed about a photograph that he had. And I looked at it and I said, this cannot possibly be a real snowflake. I mean, it's just not possible. I eventually emailed him. He put me in touch with a book he had written on this, which is amazing. And I really wanted to start trying. So I started taking photos of snowflakes. And at first the results were okay. But Don helped teach me and guide me. And the reason I got into snowflake photography in the first place is one of the reasons I went to Florida was winter. I actually had developed, when I was a kid, I loved winter. I loved our big snows. We also used to get tons of snow, which we this winter have had, but most of the time did not. And until I got to medical school, and I had to drive my Geo Metro, all three cylinders of it, to various rotations on roads that become curved during the winter time. And I was constantly trying to avoid cars as I would play bumpers with them. But I began to hate being out in the winter. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to go to Florida. And so when I came back, winter sports didn't appeal to me anymore. And I didn't want to deal with I-70. So I had to have something to make winter positive. And when I saw those snowflakes of Don's, I knew that this was going to be the transformation. This was going to change how I felt about winter. And it has transformed my life, because I look forward to spending time with these snowflakes. I get so into the photography that I have to remind myself to go inside and not get frostbite, because I will just spend all that time outside. And I can't tell you how much they mean to me.
It's terrific. It's terrific. And I know you brought kind of a pet with you. Speaking of the snowflake experience.
So I've never worn this, and I probably never will, but this is the every single photo you saw in our exhibit is from this black wool sock, which is what I use to capture all of my snowflakes on there. And the fibers kind of stick out from the sock a little bit and are able to capture individual snowflakes as they fall down vertically. I usually hold it vertically to capture the snowflakes. And every single, it's funny, I've got to actually put it back outside when I get home, because it has to be outside temperature, which is one of the prerequisites of, I've gotten some great school kid questions that are like, how do you get those snowflake photos indoors? And the answer is, there is no indoors. You got to capture them all outside and then go inside and not freeze to death. And so this is the magic. This is the secret sauce. And this is another Don Komarechka thing.
So the rest of it, it's some of the people who were during the registration process, we asked people, do you have any questions? And a lot of the questions were technical questions, like, what kind of gear do you use to actually take these pictures? And we know the frozen sock is the key, but is there anything else that you think is, a critical aspect that if people want to explore this or understand what you're doing?
Absolutely. I actually put together a series of YouTube videos that sort of capture on Don's Komarechka's techniques, but also refined with my own. And the priced entry is actually not that expensive. You just need a camera, a bunch of what are called extension rings, which cost about $20 to $30 for a set. And then a basic lens, a macro lens, and a thing called a ring flash, which goes on the end. You could actually purchase the whole kit for, minus the camera, about less than $250. And so it's not, if you go to YouTube and put in my name, you'll be able to learn how to do it too. And I encourage people to do that. Anything that makes people get closer to experiencing this wonder in nature, these moments sublime that really draw you in and bring you mindful into the moment. I want as many people taking photos as possible. There's only a few trillion every time it snows outside, so there's an abundance of models, most of which I hope melt in a fiery death this week as it warms up. So, but
so how did you kind of transition from being interested in the sky and storms to becoming a hardcore storm chaser?
Well, fortunately, Ms. Dalton, who's here tonight, or Ms. Walton, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to put a D there, but she's also she's a hardcore storm chaser. I am what's called a wimp. No, I actually, this was hysterical. I would get so excited when there was a tornado watch. And I would go out with my camera, and every time there was a tornado warning where they're like, get inside, I'm like, get outside, looking for the tornado. And the skies are magnificent around these severe storms. Though I'm really glad that they've sort of moved east over time, courtesy of global warming, but they're magnificent. I'd always look around, and then I'd get sad as the storms went away in the distance. And it wasn't until I was in college and there was a USA Today article that had a feature about two storm chasers. And I was like, wait a minute, hold the phone. You can actually drive towards the storms. This was like sort of a thought that didn't really naturally occur to me that I had a vehicle and I could be mobile. But it wasn't until my wife and I started chasing in medical school that I actually started chasing storms. And one of the first nights that we actually went on a storm chase, which A, don't do it at night, but B, we were chasing just east of here to capture lightning, because lightning is another one of my obsessions. I don't have a lightning photo in there, but I love lightning. It unfortunately also requires you to be outside in the lightning, but which is a downside. Yeah, just a little bit. But we were sitting there watching this lightning, and there was a piece of there was lightning that was getting cut off by something that was moving across the road in front of us. And I'm like, you know what? I may be crazy. It's 10:30 p.m., which is unusual, moving north to south. That could be a tornado. And it passed, and we thought, oh, that was really cool. I think we got good video of the tornado in one of these power flashes. And then we drove on to the highway, and as soon as we got off the exit ramp, not even 100 yards off the exit ramp, we were in debris. We were literally less than maybe a quarter mile away from a tornado at nighttime, the worst way to chase these things. And so that did modify my technique a little. And the funny part about storm chasing is, for those who have never done it, and my wife will tell you at length, most of it is driving in clear weather. I mean, most of the time it's clear weather chasing. It's very, very boring because we want to get there at the time that the storms form. And we do a very different forecasting than like the National Weather Service does, because we want to pinpoint it. Really, in my experience, you have to be within 25 miles of the storm as it forms to really get a chance at tornadoes. Pretty hard to do. And tornadoes don't tend to follow the road network. If anything, there's two rules. One is the road you're on will end abruptly when you're chasing it or being chased by it. And the second is that you'll get a great view of it just over that hill there. And then you get to the top of that hill and see that there's yet another hill there. Now, mathematically, in theory, that should mean that the United States continues to rise to an infinite height. But I will tell you, 100% true. That is definitely what happens when you're chasing storms. So I learned a lot back in the days before GPS. And that was always exciting because you had to buy maps every single year because the roads changed. And there were a few times where I got into some pretty sticky situations, such as finding out that in fact the road that the map said was there is not there because it got washed out. There's not great things to figure out when you're in the midst of a pretty severe storm. So it was a very good blessing that GPS came around to save me from myself, because I made a lot of bad errors when I was younger. But the thing that was really important to me about storm chasing is that these storms are magnificent. They're very, very powerful and very destructive, and I acknowledge that. But the reality is that these cloud formations we're talking about are usually almost 1.5 times to 2 times the height of Mount Everest. And they're spinning, and they're miles wide, sometimes states wide. There is an unbelievable physics to them. They overlap, and I know you're probably going to ask about that, but I'll jump to that in advance. There's an overlap between medicine and anatomy and physiology to what I see with storms, which have their own anatomy and physiology. And the beauty to me is that I can look at the clouds and I can feel what's happening with them, not through some ESP that I still am trying to harvest and hopefully get someday, because I really could use some ESP right about now. But but because they have an emotion, they have a feeling that is very kinesthetic and pretty amazing. When I see a storm, when I see a patient, there is an overlap between understanding their anatomy and physiology and hearing their story. Every storm is trying to tell a story. And those stories are rather incredible. In fact, I think Jen would probably agree with me that you can actually see another storm chaser's photo of a storm and not even need it labeled with what date it was taken. And we can recognize each other's storms because they are unique, they are incredible, and to me, they are truly mesmerizing. So what I try to capture, and hopefully did, and hopefully you guys felt some of that, is the sense of scale. Like, to me, the most amazing thing is how much these storms have this incredible size, height, width, and they're all moving. And I can't quite capture that behind the lens, but I try. And that is what keeps me going every single time, is I want to bring that. I take my photos for me primarily, and then my family and friends, but it's unique for me tonight because I'm getting to share them with you. And so I hope you're capturing some of that sense of awe that I feel around these storms.
That's powerful stuff.
They're powerful. They move me.
Being a physician and a storm chaser is a relatively unusual combination, I think. And, I know you've told me a little bit about this, but maybe you can share a little bit with everyone about what happened in May 2011 when you were chasing a storm that led you to Joplin, Missouri, and, what transpired there, and maybe how your work and your attitude kind of took a pivot from that point.
So back in May 2011, I was really struggling in life, trying to adjust to a bunch of different things at one time. I was out storm chasing in southeast Kansas, and the day was what we call a high risk day, meaning that there was a high likelihood of severe tornadic storms. We have a joke in storm chasing that if the moment that the National Weather Service says that it's going to be a high risk day, nothing happens. And that was sort of how that day had started. A bunch of disorganized storms in southeast Kansas, which weren't really doing anything. But we decided to follow them anyway, even though I was ready to call it a day. And around about 4:30 p.m., suddenly the storms went from really just, I was talking to one of my friends over the ham radio, and I said, man, it just looks like somebody threw up all over my computer screen, because it's just a bunch of different colors and nothing is organized and nothing's making sense, to holy crud, this thing is really suddenly getting its act together. And I remember radioing him, and I said, this storm's going to do amazing things. It had that feel. And so roughly around 4:45, it really started to look very organized on radar. Shouldn't have gotten that organized, but did, from a number of different reasons. And then as soon as it hit what we call the boundary, it went a little bit crazy. And the tornado started as just a few wisps, maybe 5 yards, 10 yards across, to 3/4 of a mile wide in 45 seconds. So it actually grew wider than the speed that it was traveling, which in part, unfortunately, was also within the confines of the city of Joplin. And that led to a number of fatalities. And then siren fatigue, which is a real thing in the Midwest. They hear all these tornado warnings, the sirens go off, no one takes them seriously, no one took it seriously. And unfortunately, or actually fortunately, it was a Sunday afternoon, but they were getting ready for high school graduation at that time. So a lot of people had a lot of other things on their mind. The tornado widened to about a mile wide. And as it did so, it went from an EF, 1 to an EF5. Now, we should talk about the Fujita scale briefly. The enhanced Fujita scale, that's where the E comes from, is actually not a marker of how powerful a tornado is, but how much damage it does and to what kind of structures. So the EF scale was created by Ted Fujita and has been improved upon by the National Weather Service to try and estimate wind speeds in a tornado. So you can't look at a tornado and say, oh gosh, that looks like an EF5. That doesn't exist. That happens in the movie Twister. And I love the movie Twister, but it's just so technically wrong. It's incredible. For sure. Well, cows do fly, but not in one piece, and not usually past your windshield, but into it. So yeah, so that does happen, definitely. But sorry to disappoint you, Greg. So what happened when we talk about one of the quirks of the EF scale is that if you have a 2 mile wide tornado, and actually the largest I ever chased was 2.5 miles wide, but it only hits an outhouse. It may be 2.5 miles wide, and it may have wind speeds of 230 miles per hour, but it actually would be an EF0 to an EF1. Whereas you can have a little tornado that's about 10 yards across. And if it hits a well-built structure and takes it off the foundation, it would be an EF5, even though it's very small. So there's no correlation, although generally bigger is badder. So Joplin was unique in that it went from not doing much damage to an EF5 in minutes. There was advanced warning for 30 minutes in the city of Joplin before it actually moved into the major metropolitan area. Friends of mine who run a storm chase company, and by the way, if you ever want to learn how to storm chase, I highly recommend going with a storm chase company so you can learn how to do this. This is not something you should learn the way I did. This is one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of things, but trust me, it's a much better way to go. He was running tour vans and they were trying to escape the tornado, which was moving around now pretty decent speed. He rolled down his window to a bunch of teenagers who were walking on the street and he's like, get out, there's a tornado. They flipped him off and their fate's unknown. They probably died. So this was all going on in the city. I was on the backside of the tornado, which is an area of incredibly intense wind, but I couldn't see the tornado. What I saw instead was something I've never seen to this day, but of course I've not been on many EF5 tornadoes. The lightning was not striking cloud to ground. The lightning was traveling in short zits of like 25 yards, 30 yards horizontally in the tornado. And it was this constant light of these shocks. It literally looked like somebody was taking like a sparkler to the back of the tornado. And the other thing that it produced, which I'd heard about in research studies, was this intense what's called infrasound. And infrasound is used by the US military to scare the bejesus out of the military, of the other military. It's a sound we can't hear, but we can actually feel. And actually, I believe it was Bach used it in one of his organs. The lowest notes on an organ can be felt but not heard. And I could feel myself becoming incredibly terrified, like a terror like I've not had. And at first we thought we were okay because there was still traffic coming the other direction and we were chasing that. But then eventually it turned out there was no traffic coming anymore. And we ended up on what I thought was tornado damage. A bunch of semis turned over and a bunch of cars flipped and all this stuff. And so we got out to help. And while I was on the side of the road, a police officer eventually showed up. There were no police for a good 10 minutes. And he showed up and I said, you know, I'm a physician. I'm here to help. I used to be an EMT. Where do you guys want me? And he said, well, I hope you didn't work at St. John's Hospital. And I said, no, I'm from out of town. He's like, because St. John's just got hit. And I think, and even now it gives me goosebumps. The idea of a hospital is sort of sacrosanct, even from nature, you know. It just, that doesn't happen. And he said they had no communication with that. And the only other hospital is Freeman Health System. Well, in a fit of incredible engineering, they decided to build both hospitals side by side, sort of Porter Swedish style, but only 100 yards apart. And those were the only two major hospitals for the entire city in the middle of Tornado Alley. So so Freeman Health System had been damaged. When I rolled up on that, because that's where we went to go to help, it was a scene kind of like out of The Walking Dead. First of all, to the right of the hospital, as we came over the hill, everything was just flattened. And people were screaming for help. And there was nothing I could do about that. So I decided to move towards the hospital because I knew that's where my strength lies. And when we pulled into the parking lot, the power generator had also been hit for Freeman Health System. So they were not only blacked out, but their backup power was down. And the only thing I could see was the asynchronous flashing of the fire lights. Like the lights were just flashing and they were asynchronous outside, and it felt like The Walking Dead. It was completely quiet outside. And we got into the ER and there went the quiet. Everything was in kind of chaos. I ended up working there for about 12 hours, first in the emergency department, then subsequently taking care of patients who were over by from St. John's that were brought over on bus. Now, a very interesting, funny quirk was that particular Sunday. If is CT Lynn here still? No, he went. What a bummer. He'd love this story. The capacity in St. John's Hospital was reduced dramatically. They had half their normal patient population because they were installing Epic. And so for those of us in the healthcare, the EMR, so because they knew there might be trouble, they actually reduced the number of, it's the first time that Epic has saved a single life. And it actually saved, hundreds that night. So that was pretty amazing. Fortunately, St. John's was partially occupied, but the top 2 floors were supremely damaged. One of the patients who came over told me about how his nurse got ripped away from where he was, and she ultimately perished, unfortunately. And then shortly after she got ripped out of his area, a Coke machine came down the hall and took out a wall while he was on the top floor. So I ended up taking care of about 50 patients that night. And the most amazing thing was that I didn't have to document a thing, really, except orders. And it was the best night of medicine in my life.
Just helping.
I just was able to take care of patients. And I began to see that there was this incredible gap between what the average internal medicine hospitalist does and how we could be helpful in disaster. And I was being helpful, but I actually was chasing with another physician, believe it or not. And he was being a bit like a chicken, like a head cut off, because he had no idea what to do. So he was scrambling around different floors trying to be helpful. But I had had training as an EMT. So it was an amazing experience. And I thought, this has to be fixed. This is what I have to do. And so I shifted my career focus, and I'm pleased that now I get to participate in some pretty amazing disaster preparedness at the hospital, regional, state, and multi-state level because of what happened in Joplin, because I promised myself that night to the people I was taking care of that I would try and change the system. And I've been on that with Matt a little bit, where we've looked at crisis standards of care. And how do we get the hospital prepared for when things don't go well? And that was a transformative moment for me. And so it also was kind of cool because now I'm blending my favorite 2 things together, right? I've got medicine and I've got storm chasing. And it's been a wonderful thing because I've gotten to be integrated into the storm chasing community as sort of the doc in the storm chasing community. And Jen and I are about to go to Norman, Oklahoma, which, boy, howdy, there is no place better than Norman, Oklahoma in the middle of winter. Let me tell you, that is, there's so much to do. But we'll be there at the end of the week, both of us speaking. Jen is also pretty inspirational because she's been leading the charge for women in chasing. And so it was a male-dominated field. And there's been a lot of misogyny and other sexist things. And so seeing the women rise to the top has been a joy of mine, just so you know, you got a big fan of me. But this is the cool part, is watching people transform their lives through weather. And I love that part of my life.
Thank you for what you did there.
Thanks.
It's really impressive. And it brought a lot of benefit, even though it was a disaster at the time. It had good ramifications.
It did. It changed my life for the better.
Do you think there's kind of this tug between being on a storm chase and realizing that bad things are happening, when at the same time you want to take pictures, you want to record what you want to record, you want to, do the storm chase, but then, there's a car that's off the road, and that kind of yin yang of, your moral duty to help versus the reason you were there.
You guys should come to Norman. That's my talk. But so yeah, that's good. Yeah, this is one of the things that's interesting about life. In medicine, we often get excited about good cases. A good case is one that's usually quite compelling, interesting, complicated, rare. If you talk to an internist who's good at his job, or a family medicine doctor who's good at their job, they get excited about different cases. And, I can remember calling my dad repeatedly. He's a retired nephrologist, with a great case. These great cases are actually tied to people who are suffering pretty serious illness. there is an interesting dichotomy between the fact that somebody is suffering and I am part of their care team, and I'm chasing storms and people's lives are being affected irrevocably. I'm sure there's an ethical principle that Matt could outline for us. But I often look at it this way. God brought me to Joplin to serve that night. And he often puts people and events in front of me where I can be of service. He also gives me an opportunity to take amazing photos along the way. My first and most important obligation, and I try to remember this, is how I can help somebody else. I don't always do that. I can be a selfish guy and I want that photo. Joplin got me to refocus on the fact that I need to not be selfish and self-centered all the time. I really have to be, when I'm chasing, mindful of how I can be helpful. Now, all of that aside, I can't stop what's going to happen any more than I can keep the patient from coming into the hospital, who is a really great case. But when that patient gets there, my interest in their case isn't just because it's cool or different or whatever else. It's because I really, really, really want to help them solve their problem. And much the same way, when I storm chase, I have a role as a documentarian. I have an opportunity to help in these communities that I go through, and I take that very seriously, but it's not going to stop me from storm chasing, even though destruction comes, because I'm not the one causing the destruction, but I have an opportunity to be there to help afterwards. I'm sure there's, again, an ethical principle behind that Socrates had something. Come on, Matt, give me something. No. Okay. Matt has nothing, so it's unethical.
So since Matt doesn't have anything at the moment, why don't we open it up to questions from the audience and see who else has some questions? And just press and hold the microphone when you ask your question.
And if you're not comfortable doing that, great. I will be around here for another hour if you want to talk to me directly or chastise, whatever that works out. Hey, Juan.
You guys are shy. I have some questions that
No, Juan's not shy. Trust me.
We got somebody? Good.
Yeah, we got Juan.
Okay.
You don't need anybody but Juan.
All right, Juan.
All right, let me ask my
You're on.
Thank you so much, Jason. This has been wonderful, and your photographs are amazing.
Thanks.
Does taking a photograph of a snowflake change it in any way? And if so, what, if anything, does that mean to you, or how does that impact how you take the photographs, how you think about it, how other people might think about them?
That's a very deep question. I thought we'd already gone deep. So I think the purpose of part of the reason that I've been given this gift of being a photographer of snowflakes is that it changes others in me as well to slow down and look at these things. It's very easy to get pissed off when you're, wiping off your car that's been out in the snow and has several inches of that and some ice underneath and all that, to forget how amazing the world is around us. And I don't slow down in my head. I have a squirrel and a team of monkeys working in my head. Every now and again, the team of monkeys randomly remind me of something I was going to think about 5 days ago. And as my wife will tell you, I'll just blurt it out unexpectedly and she'll say, "Thank you, monkeys," because that's where my head is. And it takes a lot to bring me back to that moment. So when I'm taking the photo, the snowflake itself doesn't change, but my connection to nature, to God, and to my ability to be in that moment. Now, I will tell you that when I'm not able to use my camera, the antithesis happens. I become a raging, "Oh my God, where's my camera?" And I'm sure Jen can confirm this, that she has the same dreams. If there's a scene that needs to be photographed and I don't have my camera, I go crazy. So it's very important. So the camera is actually a soothing device. But how does it change the snowflake? Well, snowflakes are evanescent. So as soon as they finish dropping, it takes about 30 minutes for it to drop through the atmosphere and look the way it does. So the snowflakes you see spent probably anywhere between 25 and 45 minutes dropping down out of the atmosphere. And on their way, they're telling a tale of the atmosphere as they see it. In fact, if you look at the snowflakes themselves, you'll notice they're not symmetric. That's not a thing snowflakes do. They're close. They're close. But even in the width of a snowflake, the environment that it is traveling through is different on both sides on all sides, and it changes how the snowflake comes. So for me, part of the joy of taking these photographs of snowflakes is seeing that journey that this snowflake took and how did it become like it was. But the moment it hits the ground, it's already sublimating. So it begins to change its structure. If I don't photograph it within 20 minutes, it's going to lose its structure and eventually go right back up and repeat the process. It's pretty cool. Jimmy.
First time I was at your residence, I was looking at some of these images on your wall, and you took me outside and you kind of showed me your process, and I saw the sock lying there on the table. It was there when we went out, and you just left it lying there whenever we came back, and I saw you bring it again today. Do you have an emotional attachment to that sock? I was surprised that you were bringing that sock.
It has not left my hands, number one. Number two, yeah, I am emotionally attached to that sock. And just so you know, it's twin because they're, that's how you get socks. In case you're not familiar with that, Jimmy, is locked up safely in the house. There was a time when I first was photographing snowflakes where I'd leave them both outside. And one day the wind took them and spread them everywhere. And ever since then, it was sort of like Wilson. And so, only one goes outside at a time. I keep there's the air and the spare. So, so yes, very attached to that.
Emergency preparedness.
This is what I do. I mean, this is kind of in a nutshell.
But does it have a name?
God, it should have a name, shouldn't it? I like to think of it as master and servant. But maybe that's not it. Cynthia.
Jason, I've always heard throughout my whole life that there's no such thing as two snowflakes being the same. How is it that out of all of those snowflakes that you photograph and then ones that we don't see, how is it that they are not the same?
I love that question because our experience in life has taught us that no two things are alike. No two trees are the same. No two people are the same. The right and left side of your body are not the same. Nature is filled with asymmetries. And the thing that's fascinating is that the reason that there are no two snowflakes, there's a guy who's an absolute snowflakeologist, true story. This is what his PhD work is in snowflakes. I definitely went up the wrong tree. I imagine though I make more money than he does, but in any case, he has figured out the physics behind snowflakes, and he has in the lab claimed that he's created two identical snowflakes, and even his have irregularities in it. It's impossible because the way the water molecules deposit themselves, how they grow, changes in just literally not even micrometers down to nanometers. And the same process of sublimation is going on at the same time, which is the equivalent of evaporation. But for physics, people know that it's not the same thing. But yes, these water molecules don't want to stay in crystal. Some of them are evaporating, some of them are sublimating, and they're changing. And so when you assemble snowflakes, it would be a lot like working with a Tinker Toy set that some of the Tinker Toys would like spontaneously kick themselves off. You could build a beautiful thing, but some of them are going to change and some of them are going to be extra. It's just a remarkable thing. And the thing that I think is incredible is it's 30 minutes to create what you see in there. If you gave me a block of ice and 1,000 years with my monkeys, we still wouldn't be able to carve out something so amazingly perfect. Pops, let's see if you can follow directions. You have to hold it down, Dad. Yeah, see,
Okay,
already.
got that.
There you go.
Right.
Thanks, Juan, for the save.
Yeah. Jace, I've always been amazed at your ability to see a photograph. Does that happen all at once and it's there and you snap the shutter? Or do you wait for things to come together and then you see it?
That's a great question. So it turns out that one of the rules you learn in storm chasing is if you see the photo, take the damn photo because it's never going to get better. And I referenced the hills. You're never going to, there's never going to be a chance where you're going to get to the top of the hill and it's going to be a clear view. So you got to stop and take the photo. But when I'm taking the photo, I am literally going through in my mind, except for the snowflakes where it's more of a technical exercise. When I'm out taking nature photography, I am literally looking at the photo and feeling the emotion that I'm trying to capture. And there are many times where there's an amazing thing happening and I can't quite decide to take the photo because it's not something I can capture. Irm and I have spent a lot of time looking at cloudscapes where I'm like, yeah, but I can't capture the photo of that. It's just amazing to see, like sunsets. They're extraordinarily difficult to photograph. So I have to see the photo and get the feeling of the photo. And that happens while I'm holding the camera. And then I take a bunch of extra photos just in case I screwed that one up, because that's usually my process. Yeah, but I can see it before I take the shot.
One more.
Yeah.
This thing about no two snowflakes being alike, how do we really know that? What about a snowflake in Denver as compared to one in Nome, Alaska?
Well, I've done an exhaustive survey, and you know, the last snowflake census showed that they definitely do differ. You know, it's all about equality, but no, they're not equal. Yeah, it would be so rare. I mean, the number of things that would have to come together, even though there's a number of snowflakes, it would be just amazing. And get this, every single snowfall we have, there are still more stars in our galaxy than there are snowflakes on the ground, which is just a really hard thing to believe. See, this is what I talk about, this wonderment of nature. That's what I want. I want to capture that and get people excited about that, because it excites the hell out of me.
Well, thank you. This has really been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot of things. And I think all of our audience has too. And I want to thank everybody for coming.
Oh my goodness,
and,
yes. Thank you guys. It means
enjoy the
world to me.
show, have more food. I have one coming event to talk to you about, just because I like to market our things. A week from tonight, on February 7th, from noon to 1:30, we're having a discussion about the other exhibit, the 1000 exhibit. And photographer, Debbie Arlick, and David, the young man's mom, will be joined by a neuroscientist, by Gayla Elliott, who's here, our art therapist on campus, the director of the Epilepsy Foundation, and they're going to discuss how art kind of impacts disability and stigma and compassion. So I think it'll be a really interesting discussion, and the show in the lobby closes on the 13th. So this will be kind of our closing event for that. So I hope you'll explore that and enjoy, have some refreshments, visit with Jason, and have a great rest of your evening.
And
Thank
just
you.
one more time before we close out. Thank you for supporting and getting me inspired and getting me the cameras that got me going. And thank you so much to my family, my kids, who are fellow storm chasers. There's Kai. He looks so cool tonight, doesn't he? God damn, he's a sharp looking kid next to the other kid. No, I'm just kidding. I want to individually thank my family because they've been so supportive, and my kids do come storm chasing with me. Irma gets bored, so she doesn't. And especially the people who are very special and near and dear to my heart who came here tonight. And a surprise, Liesel, my God. And then thank you. Thank you all for sharing this journey with me. Thanks, David.